Good evening. It's 7 p.m. and I'd like to open the May 6th, 2021 school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room, which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask the people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chair of the raised hands, and the chair will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute and state their name and address. After speaking, we request that the participant return the microphone back to mute. All right, with that out of the way, we'll get started. On our agenda, we have the consent agenda, the minutes from April 29th, 2021, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from April 29th, 2021, and oath to bills and payroll.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll remind everyone that all our votes on Zoom are roll call votes. So I'll start with Timolin.
Timolin Rossius, yes.
And Brad.
Brad Austin, yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Matt.
Matt Hunt, yes.
And Mike Fontanella votes yes as well. All right, we have at least two sections, portions in our meeting for input from interested citizens, one now and one closer to the end of the meeting. If there's anybody who would like to speak before the school committee, please use the raise your hand function, and Dorothy Malone, our meeting moderator, will get you in front of us.
I do not see any hands. Chair
Right.
Fontanella.
No hands up. And we will go right into recognition. Dr. Clenchey.
Thanks, Mike. Tonight is Chairman Fontanella's last school committee meeting after serving 15 years on the school committee, 7 years as chairman. An incredible gift of time that Mike has given the community, staff, and students. Mike's dedication and commitment to making sure that our students and staff were well supported during his tenure were at the forefront of every decision that he made. His ability to listen with an objective lens and represent all stakeholders in an equitable manner was one of Mike's many strengths that I continue to admire. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of school committee members during my career. Chairman Fontanella was one of the most effective, empowering, and compassionate school committee members that I've ever had the pleasure to work with. In fact, I can say without hesitation that through Mike's leadership, I have continued to grow as an educational leader. We talk about great leaders and visionaries who have the ability to create a legacy that incorporates long-lasting change within an organization long after they're gone. Mike is an example of a great leader who has been instrumental in moving our district forward with sustainable change. Mike's ability to work with elected officials to advocate for resources and funding was a key factor in helping our district move forward. Through his tenure, our district has had a number of state and national recognitions for academic excellence, as well as recognitions in athletic and co-curricular successes. Mike has created a legacy that will continue in his absence. We were in good hands with Mike as chair as we navigated through uncharted waters as a result of the pandemic. Through Mike's skillful leadership, the school committee was able to quickly adjust to virtual meetings that were attended by hundreds of community members. Mike skillfully led the school committee meetings, providing the necessary time for public input and ensuring that we were able to cover the agenda topics and keep the meeting at a reasonable length. Well, most of the time anyway. And not to mention that we have had more meetings this year that would equate to multiple years of school committee meetings under normal circumstances. Not an easy task, but Mike was up to the challenge. On behalf of myself and the leadership team, thank you for your tireless leadership. We were in good hands and will be forever grateful for your dedication, commitment, and advocacy for our students and staff. You are leaving huge shoes to fill, and you will be truly missed. We presented Mike with a few gifts today as a token of our appreciation for his leadership over the years. And Dorothy, could you put those pictures up, please?
One moment.
There we go. And we presented signed citations for exemplary service from State Representative Arceria and State Senator Eldridge. Our long-standing presentation of a service recognition plaque. And first time ever, the first edition of Tiger golf balls. Now, the only drawback or downside to this is if Mike has a bad slice and somebody finds a Tiger golf ball, we'll know exactly who belongs to, and also that he had a bad game. In hindsight, we probably should have engraved the words "return to sender" on each of the golf balls. And
I'd just like to say that gambling's illegal at Bushwood, sir, and I never slice.
And of course, one can never have enough Tiger gear, so we had to restock Mike's closet with some new Tiger gear, including hats and shirts, etc. At this time, I'd like to open it up to the school committee for further comments.
Current or past?
Current.
Current. All right, I'll start since I've worked with Mike for 5 years now on the school committee, and it's been a absolute pleasure. I don't think there's many board members in town that work harder than Mike and puts more time into what he does. I think people have really got to see that this year. The amount of effort that Mike has put in, and he's left us in a lot better situation than he found us when he came here 15 years ago. So we are in really good ground right now that he's leaving us. Hopefully we can maintain it. But I wish Mike the best of luck. I know he'll still be around and helping us and giving us advice. So thanks, Mike, for everything. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, so I think those of us who are new to the committee, really appreciated Mike's leadership. We were learning the rules this time last year, and we had a really challenging year. And I think that the town definitely benefited from, we as a committee certainly benefited from both Mike's leadership in the public sessions, but also just the way he runs this committee or ran this committee. I think it's maybe clear by the length of our meetings is that we tried to play everything strictly by the book. No, discussions outside of public view, strict adherence to open meeting laws. And I really respected that about Mike and the leadership he showed. We had a lot of tough decisions to make this year, and the public deserved us to see us debate it. And they had that opportunity thanks to Mike. It's I've only been on the committee for 1 year. It's tough to imagine it without Mike running the meetings, but we'll try to make do and expect to see Mike Fontanelle as a hand raised public session starting next week, maybe. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, Brett.
All right, I'll go next. Mike, it's been a pleasure. I've certainly learned a lot from you this year. I was scrolling back through our emails over the course of the year, and there were a couple times where we had significant public input, and it was like we couldn't do anything right in the eyes of the public, I guess. I mean, that's tongue in cheek a little bit. And of course, the three newbies, I guess we just didn't know any better, but you were sort of the glue that held us all together and got us through those difficult times. So can't thank you enough for that. And look forward to seeing you on the golf course and not in a Zoom meeting. And probably owe you a couple beverages at the pub since we never got to do that this year. So But it's been terrific. I've learned a lot. It's been a pleasure. Littleton's certainly a different place because of your involvement. And, we don't have the 400 folks joining us tonight, but we should, because you've made a difference in this community. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Justin.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Mike, for everything, for all of the phone calls, the talks, the emails, the walking me through all the stuff that I didn't know that went on in this committee. Being a newbie and walking into this, it was pretty stressful for me in the beginning. And you just kept telling me, we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. We'll be good. We'll be good. And I just want to thank you for your leadership and your mentorship. It meant a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Timlin.
Thanks, everyone. The chair position takes, excuse me, so much time and commitment. And this year especially, I don't remember any other year where it required as much time as it did. I don't think there was a day, probably 6 days a week, that Mike and I didn't have a conversation about something. And I really appreciate Mike's continuous availability when he had so many other things to do. We also have a number of special guests tonight who would like to say a few words as well, and I'm going to open it up to them. We have Daryl Baker with us, Chuck DeCoste, PJ Avella, Charlie Alice, and Nancy Mazzoni.
Well, I'll go first. This is Daryl. I really enjoyed the time that I served on the committee with Mike. Many of the words that you said, Kelly, typified Mike there. The dedication, the number of hours that he's put in, not only in front of the camera here, but in back of the camera. The daily, sometimes meetings that are necessary for that he had to tend to for it. And what was really admirable is his not only his dedication, but the perspectives that he brought to the committee. He'd recognize the challenges associated with individual students, but was also looking at how we move the whole district forward. That how do you deal with the whole construct of the district. I joked with him during a private text a few months ago of how does it feel to be the most hated man in Littleton, because no matter what decision you made, probably half the citizens were going to not be happy with it there. And in typical Mike, it was just yeah, that's just what it is. Not personalizing the toll that it takes on himself in leading this district through these times here. I want to thank him for all the time that he's put into this, and I think he serves as a role model for all the future chairs and future school committee members of what it takes to be dedicated to the success of the district. Thank you, Mike, for your service to the town.
Thanks, Daryl.
I'll jump in here if I may, just because I don't want to go behind PJ, because oftentimes, as I served on the school committee, I served 5 years with Mike. 4 of those were with PJ, and anytime as the newbie, as you guys have put it, if I went behind those guys, I really had nothing to add. So so I'm going to jump in front of PJ. First met Mike when he realized I had 5 kids. And my kids were enrolled for basketball, and Mike, outside of all that he does for the schools, he's dedicated himself to Littleton as a whole in so many different areas. And basketball is one of those. It's one of his passions, and it's one of those things that he really put a lot of time and effort into. But this one, just getting to know Mike after we moved into town, and apparently he needed a coach, and somehow he talked me into it. And oh, don't worry about it. Same thing, Daryl. Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get through it. Or I forget who was saying. I think maybe it was Justin or Timlin. We'll get through it. We'll get through it. And I couldn't even spell basketball, let alone coach basketball. But he figured I have 5 kids, so I can wrangle kids. So, and I had a blast doing it. Ended up having a couple championship teams. So it was more about managing the kids than it was about the basketball. I echo what everybody has said. My time served with Mike, 5 years on the school committee, but the time that he put into basketball and my last 6 years as a select board member, It's collaboration with the school committee and having relationships with all of you. And Mike and I have always had a strong relationship, not always agreed on everything, but we've always had a strong relationship, and we've been able to have some civil discourse and been able to debate things pretty openly and sometimes not openly. Sometimes we've done those private text messages that Daryl was just speaking of. But it was an absolute pleasure to serve with Mike. And PJ, no disrespect, but it was a pleasure to serve with everybody I served with. But for Mike, I think it's unprecedented the number of years that you've given to the town. I anticipate you're going to give us more in some way, shape, or form, because payback's, you know what, and I plan on wrangling you back in. I do want to just thank you, Mike, for your mentorship and your friendship. And whether you know it or not, you've played a huge role in shaping my passion for service in the community and your collaborative style of leadership. And I'll continue to lean on you as a trusted advisor, and I hope that you'll certainly let me know if there's something that you disagree with, and I have a funny feeling you will.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Chuck.
You bet.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. Appreciate you introducing me there. And Mike and I joined the school committee together about 15 years ago. Not about, really 15 years ago, almost the day right now, when we joined the school committee. I found it a little bit too tough. So after 8 years, I moved on and took the easier job and went up to the select board. Much easier than the school committee. But very sincerely, Mike, you've been wonderful, both as a leader and as a friend, as a colleague through all those years. The 15 years, and certainly the years we spent together on the school committee through various negotiations, superintendent hirings, budget formulations, all things that kept the ball rolling forward. Sometimes it felt like a Sisyphean task as we were pushing that ball up the hill, but we did get it to the top many, many times. And it was your leadership, your compassion, and your commitment to the ideal of educating the students and what was best for the kids. And I think we can say unequivocally that throughout Mike's tenure, he looked at what was good for the children, the students of our town, and how do we make it better for them. And sometimes it was pretty difficult. Though there were some lean times, budget years, and we had to make some cuts. It was very difficult decisions we had to make. But again, Mike's leadership throughout that was essential to us making what we felt was the best possible decisions for our town. And we did move on from that. The school system is a much better school system than the one we found. Not because people previous to us weren't doing a good job. There were a lot of things that lined up that helped it happen. And one of the major things, if not the major thing, was Mike Fontanella serving on our school committee. You look at it, I'm a senior and not a senior in high school. No children, obviously, in the school system, but a resident of the town of Littleton. And it's a much better town because of our school system. And it's a school system that is much better because of Mike. So Mike, I want to thank you for your friendship, your leadership, your collegiality, and what you've done for our town and how Littleton is so much better because of your 15 years serving on the school committee. And as we all know, he's got many other ancillary tasks well beyond the school committee that he participates in town that helps us be that better town. So Mike, thanks, buddy. Good luck and enjoy the retirement if there is indeed one.
Thank you, BJ.
Mike,
Charlie,
how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I can say that I was on the committee before you, and I remember when you first came on, we had a conversation. I don't know if you remember this, but you said that decisions are driven by data. And I've always taken that to heart. Over the last 15 years, at 52 weeks in a year, at probably 15 hours a week, if you're going to be a good school committee member, that's the minimum. You've donated 12,000 hours plus, Mike, to the town of Littleton. That's a phenomenal number. The last year has been difficult for anyone on a school committee. We've had some experiences from the Department of Education, the federal government, boards of health that have put us in some perilous positions, but you've always handled it with integrity and dignity, which I would expect. I also want to thank you for your support at Schcmte Tech through the years. Really means a lot. So with that, my last question is, did I hear you going over to FinCom?
No, you did not hear that. No, and I hope my wife didn't hear that either, because that would be bad.
I'm just messing with you, but congratulations. Enjoy your time, Mike. Well deserved. And thanks again for all you've done for the town.
All right. Thank you, Charlie.
I'd like to just, before anybody leaves, the LCTV would like us to all stare at our cameras. They'd
I
like
think
to-
we have one more person.
Yeah, Nancy just showed up.
Let me grab Nancy but nobody leave until we do that, after Nancy's here. Thank you.
Yes, Princess.
Thank you, Chuck. Where'd she go? Is there any room for her? Nancy, any room? Oh, and Mike too.
2 for 1.
I just want to say thank you for all your years of service. Don't forget, I taught you everything you know.
It's hard to believe what the school committee would have been like over the last 10 years if it wasn't for you, Mike. So I've been an observer and a colleague of yours for a while, and I don't know what the town would have been like if it wasn't for the kind of steady leadership you provided. So I'm not going to brag right now about how you were my basketball coach too back in the day, but super thankful for everything you did, and you deserve some time off. So again, thanks for everything you did. And I think from both of us, we enjoyed working with you, and good luck.
Thank you, Nancy and Mike. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, everybody smile. We're
Good job, everybody.
Are we good?
Okay. We're good.
Thank you, everybody. It makes me very uncomfortable when people thank me for all this stuff, because I really enjoy doing it. I have more fun than I probably should have doing something like this. Basketball is one thing. I mean, obviously that's for me in a gym. I'm never more comfortable than I am there. But even this stuff is fun for me. I don't know if everybody knows this. I have a brother and sister. They're twins. They're 13 months younger than I. I think the term is Irish triplets. And it's not like we sat around the dinner table when we were younger figuring this out, but we all ended up being on school committees, or down in Connecticut, they call it the Board of Education, where my brother was. And we all ended up being chairs. What we did get at our household from our father was a, lifetime of, you have to give back. You can't just take, you have to give back. So, and he was a volunteer. He never ran for elected office, but he was on different boards, appointed boards. And, he gave a lot of time. He coached sports when my brother and I were done playing, because that's just what he did. And he set a tone for the three of us. And we obviously took it to heart and followed it. I couldn't have done it without my wife, her success and her willingness to let me be a part of that, literally and figuratively, in the lifestyle that she created for us, that gave me the flexibility to be in and around Littleton, is why I got to do this for this many years and this many hours. I feel very fortunate because, my high school friends all literally think I do not work. They are convinced I don't work. And I'm like, I do work. I just don't get paid. That's the problem. I work a lot. I don't get paid for coaching. I don't get paid for school committee. My wife doesn't pay me for the work I do for her company. I just work. I don't get paid, but that's okay. But without her support, I never would have been able to do this. And my kids, there were nights where, I didn't get to help them with homework, but that was okay. I really saw them a lot because we were around Littleton every day after school and stuff. And I got to coach them. It was great. My best friend's mother growing up was the town clerk for years in our hometown. And Wally and I would go over to her office pretty much every day after school because she had candy. But that was an education. 10, 12, 14 years old, the town clerk's office is where the action is. Everybody comes through the town clerk's office sooner or later. And Wally and I learned a lot. And to be able to use that life knowledge for Littleton's behalf, I feel very fortunate that I could be as effective as I was. I appreciate all the administrators I worked with, especially Diane Bemis and Kelly Clenchy. I take to heart the line between the school committee's role and the administration's role. I am not an expert on public education. I don't pretend to be, and I leave that to the pros from Dover. And we're very fortunate to have such a high functioning district. It allows the school committee to go do what they're supposed to be doing, which is the budget and policy, and keeping an eye on the superintendent. We're very fortunate in Littleton. We are a high functioning district. We have been since I got here. My kids benefited from that. A lot of Chuck's kids and Daryl's kids. We're very fortunate. I think that's why we decided that we wanted to get in, is to keep that moving forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to have done that. I really thank all the current school committee members. I talk to Kelly all the time about, I can't believe how lucky we got. This could have been, it really should have gone sideways. There's really no way the 3 school committee members getting thrown in. I told them when they got elected that you guys are going right to the deep end of the pool, no wading in. And then we were halfway through the year and I changed the analogy. I said, forget it. You're out in the ocean floundering without a life raft in sight. We got to figure it out. How are we going to stay afloat? And these 3 guys and Matt were so high functioning. We're very fortunate in Littleton. We've talked about how well we did at mitigating what was a very negative situation. We mitigated the negative impact. We didn't avoid it. It was unavoidable. There's no way getting around that, but we were able to mitigate to a large extent what a lot of other school districts were not able to avoid. So we're very fortunate. All the other school committee members that I served with in the past, it was great to see Nancy and Charlie. They were with me at the beginning with PJ and Sean Estea. That was a high functioning school committee with a lot of really smart people who worked really hard. And PJ and I were lucky. We learned a lot in those first 3 years from that school committee. And I appreciate everybody, but I will say I really appreciate seeing Daryl and PJ and Chuck. You guys were the ones that pushed me. If you weren't ready, Daryl would eat your lunch and smile doing it. So you had to be ready. You had to, Charlie said it was 15 hours and I felt that pressure, that those 15 hours, like you better be ready to go. And Chuck and PJ were the same way. I mean, we pushed each other. We argued. We argued with each other. We argued with other people. It got vociferous at times, but we were always ready. We always knew where the line was. We always knew what we had to get done because we were pushing each other, and we did a lot of really good work. PJ talked about the years that it was tough budget times. And again, I thought we were really effective at mitigating what could have really been a bad situation. We were effective at making it less worse, less bad. And that's the job most of the time. If everything's sailing along with the wind behind you, anybody can do this job. It's not that hard. The pros from Dover take care of the real heavy lifting, and we just go along for the ride. But there were years, and this year was unprecedented, where, having a good team and guys that push each other and people that push each other, and then push the Board of Selectmen, push the Finance Committee, and that's the work. That's it's a nuts and bolts job. It's not really about grand visions, because again, the administration takes care of most of that stuff on our behalf. You got to get in the trenches. You got to do the nuts and bolts. And I was very fortunate to have people that showed me the way, and that when I was saying, we got to do this way, this is how we got to do it, nobody shirked, nobody balked at it. They said, all right, let's go do it. And we got it done. So it's been a very rewarding, fulfilling experience. I feel very fortunate, and I'll be around. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Thanks again for your school and leadership during the 15 years that you spent on the school committee. I know we're virtual tonight, but I think a proper send-off would be if we could have everybody turn on their microphones, and we're going to give Mike a well-deserved round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, mine was the loudest.
I appreciate that, Chuck. All right. What's next on the agenda, Kelly? Enough with this.
All right. We'll move on, Mike. Teacher Appreciation Week was this week, and Nurse Appreciation Week also started on May 6th, and it goes to May 12th. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our teachers and nurses for their determination, dedication, and resilience to ensure that our students were well supported during a year unlike any other. I mean, we've all worked so hard to make this work, and just grateful for all of our staff. And this week we just happen to be celebrating our teachers and our nurses. I'd also like to thank the PTA for providing our school staff and central office staff with a delicious lunch. They've been doing this for a number of years, and it's so well received and well appreciated. So thank you so much for celebrating this week with us. And Cheryl Temple has a couple of acknowledgments that she'd like to make as well.
Thank you, Dr. Clenchey. I would like to recognize the Littleton Shade Tree Committee, Littleton Light and Water, and Littleton Country Gardeners. They this year maintained a longstanding Arbor Day tradition of supplying each and every third grade students with a tree. So last Friday, many members from the Littleton Shade Tree Committee, or excuse me, Littleton Country Gardeners came. They had a Zoom meeting with all of the third graders, explained to them about the tree they were going to receive, and Mrs. Romano and I passed them around. So you'll notice them around town. This year's tree was an American ash. And the kids were absolutely delighted to carry their trees home. I bet there was a lot of planting that happened over the weekend. So we want to recognize Littleton Country Gardeners for that. And my other recognition, Kelly, was for the Russell Street PTA, but you already did that for the teacher appreciation lunch. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And that brings us to the end of recognition.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have our part 3. This is I think it was a trilogy. This is the last of the curriculum updates. Beth Steele, who you got with us tonight?
All right. Thank you, Chairman Fontanella. I feel like we couldn't move on faster from your recognition, but it was well-deserved, so thank you. So we're happy, as you said, this is the third part of our 3-part series of curriculum updates. So we have with us tonight Dave Pascucci, who is our curriculum coordinator 6 to 12 for English Language Arts. We also have Valerie Finnerty, who is with us, who is our 6 to 12 science curriculum coordinator. And we also have 2 of our elementary educators with us this evening who will help with the elementary curriculum updates. We have Kelly Hart, who is one of our kindergarten teachers at Shaker Lane, and we have Rita McKinley, who is a reading specialist at Russell Street. So we're going to kick off actually with our science presentation from Valerie Finnerty. So Valerie, off to you.
Well, good evening. So I did want to start by thanking Mike Fontanella. This is my 16th year teaching at Littleton Middle School. So he has been on the school committee for most of the time that I've been at Littleton. And I am also a Littleton parent, or a former Littleton parent. So thank you from my whole family for your service. So like I said, this is my 16th year at Littleton Middle School. And science is inherently a hands-on, in-person, collaborative endeavor, which has made the last year very, very challenging for our department. However, I think we've had a lot of success. We and our students learned a lot about how to teach, how to learn, and how to do authentic science. Students did do more work on their computers, but they also created models. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, there's some 6th grade cell models that were made this spring, I believe. And we also did have science students do hands-on science investigations whenever possible. So for example, every student in the 8th grade, even remote students, dissected flowers in 8th grade science. And I learned something new, that most 8th graders have better cell phones than I do. And the photo down in the bottom middle is was a student's photo taken of the unfertilized eggs inside the ovary of a flower that she dissected. So she sent that to me, since my cell phone was a little bit blurrier. We also did make connections with students. On the bottom right-hand corner is a picture that a student sent me after he found a nest in the woods. We had studied asexual and sexual reproduction, and he captioned it "sexual reproduction." He was very excited. I also got an email from students that sent me a picture of flies mating on one of the girls' legs, and that was also captioned "sexual reproduction," but I decided not to include that in the video, in the slideshow. We also did have our science and engineering fair, which I'll talk a little bit about on a future slide. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as you may realize, we had 2 new science teachers join at Littleton Middle School in October. Amy Durkin and Crystal Dion hit the ground running as the 6th and 7th grade teachers, and they've really played a huge role in making science at the middle school successful this year, so I wanted to acknowledge them. Many of us learned a lot of new ways to use technology to make our subjects and our topics interesting and interactive. On the left-hand side, there's an example from 7th grade computer science. They used a program called Photopia to create a GIF of the phases of the moon. So I did include that video if we could show the GIF real quick. So this was something that a student made. And the top left shows the program that they used. I've never used it, so. Up on the top, the map is sixth graders used a program called Schcmte to identify the location of volcanoes in the Ring of Fire, which is where oceanic and continental plates meet. Schcmte is an add-on that allows us to write, draw, and color on PDF documents, and it was a great find. I think I'll continue to use it in the future. Down on the bottom right is an example from 8th grade. We just finished this today. We've been using this for the last 3 years, actually. It's a virtual dragon breeding game called Geneventure that allows students to use a model organism to explore and apply their understanding of basic genetics. So we piloted it about 3 years ago, and I've been using it, and so it was nice to already have that in place. All of the 6th graders participated in the district-wide STEM challenge. So the bottom middle shows a student testing one of their devices to rescue frogs. So they learn the engineering design process as part of that participation. And I believe that the top, the girl sitting at the lab station is also working on her projects. We were able to do a lot of hands-on, especially once the kids were back, and while we were hybrid. So we also had students create presentations to explain what they'd learned. So on the top right is a picture of a student teaching her peers about something that she had learned about. And then on the right-hand side, I featured some of my students actually from the Science and Engineering Fair. So I had to come up with a way. I didn't want to give up the Science and Engineering Fair. So those of you who've known me for a long time know that that is near and dear to my heart. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for kids to do authentic science. So students in the 8th grade were given the choice of creating their own original project, continuing their interrupted 7th grade project, or completed a guided inquiry project. So we had 37 8th graders who chose to do an original project or continue their 7th grade project, including 2 girls who finished their 7th grade engineering project to make a hovercraft. So one of the girls, Natalie, is sitting on her hovercraft there in the middle on the right. And then we also entered 5 of those projects in the virtual regional science and engineering fair at UMass Lowell. So I'll tell you the results in just a minute because they just came today. The rest of the 89 students chose to do a guided inquiry project. So I got a grant from the Littleton Education Fund, and I was able to purchase enough materials for all of the students to plant 12 wheatgrass plants. They each came up with their own experimental question and designed an experiment to figure out how changing a variable affected the growth of their wheatgrass. So some of the experimental questions included how the amount of sunlight affects the height of the wheatgrass, or if adding tonic water caused wheatgrass to fluoresce under a black light. So there were a lot of very different experiments that came out of that. So the girl on the side on the right is holding her wheatgrass plants. In the 7th grade, 8 students opted to complete the optional science and engineering fair projects. So we just found out the results today. We had 3 7th grade students and 5 8th grade students who entered their projects in the virtual regional science and engineering fair. Is it all right if I read their names in to the record? So we had 8th grade student Harish Ganesh. He got a first place award for his engineering project where he designed an interactive COVID cell. We had a 7th grade student, Annika Jacob, who won a second place award. She experimented with potato power. 7th grade student Kavya Kalukila was awarded a second place project also for her project on the study of the effects soil has on the pH of water. A team, 8th grade students Isabel McCurdy and Lacey Oborski, got a second place award also for their project on how does the wavelength of light affect a plant's growth. We had an 8th grade student, Pradeep, who represented LMS with his project on viruses and epidemiology. 2 first place awards, 1 honorable mention out of those experiments. So it's not all about the winning. It was really important that the kids got to do authentic science. Next slide, please. So on to the high school. At LHS, the amazing Dan Hogan taught his physics classes as a moving, talking robot. And as you can see in this video, students conducted an experiment on wave interference. He didn't miss a step. So if we could just show the video, please.
I want you to do, both of you, is put your knuckles on the ground so that the snake is slightly above the level of the floor where you are. On the cups exactly 1 time. from the slinky? I mean, they're right on that cross section?
Very pretty much.
Okay. So Alicia, I want you to send one pulse down towards the other side.
Okay, right now?
Right now. Just pull it back one full tile and then send it down. Okay, nothing happened, right?
Stretch it too much.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's really fine.
Okay, let's try it again. Okay. Everybody, both of you get ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
There we go.
3, 2, 1, go.
There we go.
So Dr. Hogan, he's a treasure, and you've probably heard he is retiring. And Dr. Dennis, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Michaud, has been offered the job as his successor. So at the beginning of the year, Dan collected old ultrasonic detectors and data interfaces and sent them home with physics students so that they could all participate in crucial hands-on experiments. Both middle and high school teachers use a program called Gizmo. So the two screenshots on the right are from Gizmos. And it was a way to give students a chance to do interactive experiments. And they are aligned with 6 to 12 standards. So the gizmo on the top right corner is an investigation of the relationship between the temperature of a gas and the motion of its particles. And then the gizmo on the bottom right is an example of a case study problem that was utilized by the anatomy and physiology students. And so the case studies were used to provide a review of certain topics with real world applications. So they had to hypothesize about the causes of problems and then conduct virtual experiments to confirm or refute their hypotheses. The experiments are not possible to do in a real classroom. So the biology teachers noted that this was actually provided an enrichment that they hadn't had in the past. Next slide, please. High school staff also had students conduct research and make presentations for their peers. For example, students in the environmental science course created presentations about professions in environmental science. The top left video, I was just going to show about 30 seconds of it. This was a short video explaining the 4 different macromolecules, and it was inspired as a result of the George Koros professional development that we did.
Macromolecules. What are they? Macromolecules are large molecules formed by the joining of smaller organic or carbon-containing molecules. And there are 4 main types.
That's probably enough unless you want to continue learning about macromolecules. So that gives you an idea of some of the projects that they were doing. The graph on the bottom is from the environmental science course taught by Wendy Sanford. And students in this class collected and analyzed data from Littleton cemeteries to look at survivorship, like longevity or how many people were still living to a certain age of Littleton residents today compared to Littleton residents in historic times. So they found actually that Littleton women in modern and historic times live longer than men. And also that in historic times, people not only lived shorter lives, but showed a different, more linear trend. And the likelihood of dying was roughly equal throughout life instead of the way it is now, where it's more likely in old age. So they found out some interesting things through gathering authentic data. Since we couldn't have students work together in traditional lab groups, we often performed in-class demonstrations. So Mike Gillen did this one on the bottom right of burning magnesium. And in honors biology, Cheryl Bizard used case studies from the University of Buffalo case collection, so up on the top right-hand corner. And these cases require students to analyze data to solve a case. And it includes cases from high school level through graduate school, so there was a lot of opportunity for high-level thinking. In the forensics course, Sarah Berlinger used a subscription website called Diablo Highway that guided students to use science to solve crimes. So kids were really doing a lot of strong critical thinking. And then in anatomy and physiology, Cheryl used a website called eMinds so that students could conduct virtual dissections. and that way they were able to still experience the dissection that was such a huge part of the anatomy and physiology class. Next slide, please. So I asked my department to send me a list of the non-compulsive professional development that they did during this last school year, and I was really blown away. So the professional development that our teachers did included the Innovators Mindset Summer Book Studies, both of them, creating and implementing digital interactive notebooks, how to teach science in a COVID-19 environment, parts 1 and 2, the Technology Institute here at LPS, virtual Google Palooza, evolution of horses in response to environmental change, evolution and adaptations of frogs, Teach It special workshop on digital data collection and tactful behavior tools, Google's hidden tools, National Geographic teacher certification, NASA, exploring Earth, Moon, and Sun, NASA home and school, I can't read it now because the pictures over it, home and school development model, design a kite, creation of inclusive classroom libraries, students, scientist spotlight development, SEI certification, grading during a pandemic, a PD with Sean Carroll, who's the author of, I can't read it because the picture's over it, I'm sorry, I don't remember what it said, Ed Camp, Massachusetts, Corn Associates Distance Learning, the Modern Classroom Approach, and the AP Summer Institute. So we've been busy. Like all teachers during the pandemic, we also all had to do a lot of informal professional development to learn so many new tricks with Google Suites, new tools, and new protocols to try to keep kids engaged and excited about science. We worked with several domains on creating more inclusive science classrooms, including some of the ones that I went through, taking a focused look at our curriculum to improve inclusion and culturally sensitive instruction. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to shout out to some of these technology resources that were provided by the district. They really made it possible for us to keep our kids engaged and keep the remote kids with us, and being able to do some of the things that we have always been able to do. So our number one resource other than Google Suites for education was probably the Explore Learning Gizmos that I mentioned. There are 3 different gizmos on this page representing genetics, chemistry, and natural selection. And then other noteworthy websites that we all used included Pear Deck, Kami, and Edpuzzle, among many others. So, and that's all that I have. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Valerie. Yeah, does anybody have any questions or comments for Brett?
That's so impressive, Valerie. Thank you so much for that presentation. It seems to me that the students got a lot of experience with the critical thinking skills. They got the science a lot, but they didn't get in the actual labs a lot. Is that fair?
Yeah, so, and although I will say I actually have ready for me to go tomorrow. I have labs, 26 labs set up so that I can have kids work at their desk tomorrow to extract their own DNA.
Well, that was my next question, is that I wondered if I could not be more impressed with the work you and your team have done up to this point. But now that we're back in the buildings, more or less at full capacity, I was wondering if there are opportunities to do a little more hands-on in the lab kind of stuff.
Well, there are, but because of the spacing, I can't have them work together. I have kids sitting at the lab stations, and so and there's a barrier between them, so I can't have them work in a group. So traditionally, I would have kids at my 6 lab stations. I'd have 4 or 5 kids at a lab station working together. So what I have is I went to the dollar store and I got these little containers, and I have it set up with plastic cups with the things that they need to do their DNA extraction. Then I'm going to have to quickly replenish it in between classes tomorrow. And I'm a little bit nervous about how that's going to go, but I'm really excited, and the kids are super excited too. And I do have some chemistry labs coming up too, and I'm going to try that again too, because the chemistry materials are inexpensive, baking soda and vinegar and things like that. And as long as we can work safely with the chemicals at desks, then I think that we can do that. One thing I have missed is the collaborative work and kids discussing together and playing off of each other. And it's just, we're just starting to get some of that back with having all the kids back. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Valerie, are the kids excited about the DNA because they think one of them might be a mutant? Is that what they're hoping for?
I'll bring that up tomorrow. Yeah. We're all actually, Mike, you know what? We all have about 62 mutations that we're born with, just so you know.
For that. Thank
And you could have a mutation that causes your family to serve on school committees because it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
your family.
That would be the kind of mutation I would get. That's definitely true. Forget
I just wanna
invisibility
say-
or the ability to fly, I would get that. Go to meetings.
Yeah. And you and I both have the red hair mutation.
Yeah, that's it.
I did the 23andMe with the genetics things, and I found out that I'm like 50% Neanderthal, which is like, I guess, really high.
50? Yeah, that's very high. I've done that too.
Oh, I would have
don't-
lost on.
4%,
I would have
but I'm
lost.
above average.
I would have lost on the over. Damn it.
Yeah.
Anybody else for Valerie? All right, thank you, Valerie. I think Brad's right. I think that the hybrid and remote learning for science was probably more of a challenge than it was for a lot of the other academic disciplines, but it looks like you guys responded in kind. I will say always too, when I get these ones, the rigor that we're asking these kids to go through is unbelievable compared to what I remember going through in my biology and science classes. I hope I think it's beneficial. We should always keep an eye on that, right? Making sure that we balance out what we expect.
I just want to say too that they've been posting the senior spotlights on Facebook on the PTA website, our PTA Facebook page. And a lot of the kids are going into science related fields.
Yeah.
That's what they're studying. So I'm always happy to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
and I would just say the obvious. That's a testimony to the quality of the education and the inspiration they're getting from the teachers. So thanks for that.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Valerie. All right, Beth, what do we got next?
All right, so we'll move on to English Language Arts with Dave Pascucci.
Scooch.
Hello, good evening. I didn't know it was going to be a Mike Font love fest tonight, but I did want to chime in as someone who's worked with you, across the table and also working side by side. I really respect your willingness to communicate, so I'll keep it at that. But I value that. So congratulations.
Appreciate it, Scooch. One of the best, I think it might have been my best graduation welcoming remarks was the "Be Like Scooch" speech. That was inspired. So
I still get teased about it regularly. So thank you for
That was 2019. I was there.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All right, so I have here the English Language Arts slideshow, state of the curriculum for grades 6 through 12. I'm proud to represent my colleagues and our creative students. Next slide, please. A few highlights and accomplishments for this year. There have been some LEF grants awarded for a teaching cultural competency through literature unit. Several online learning resources such as vocab.com, a movie streaming service, which has been quite helpful because of licensing law, and you can embed movies for hybrid learning legally, and that's been helpful in other learning resources. So thank you for those grants. As far as the humanities, also we invited an essayist, memoirist, and professor at University of Hartford, basically a writing colleague of Mr. Tombino. So Beth Richards visited students in his creative writing class. So that was an honored guest that we had this year. Another highlight from this year is sort of something that came up rather organically in Mrs. McCook's class. It was called Our Point of View, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. And it was basically a student-led, student-created presentation and discussion that came out of the novel All American Boys. This was led by Victoria McCoy and Manuel Mariel, and resource officer John Janakis also attended and participated. So it was a real, dialogue for something that is controversial and something this country is learning how to communicate and discuss in a respectful way. So that's something that happened in her class, which is a real accomplishment. Next slide, please. Here are some example slides from the 6th grade celebrations and festival project that Mrs. Tricana worked on with her students. And students, you learned about various celebrations and festivals because there's a lot more than just some of the holidays that we know and familiar with. And there's a lot of similarities with some of the festivals that we have. And it's just part of learning about other cultures. So that was, these are just a few exemplar slides from that project. Next slide, please. In Ms. McCook's English 2 honors class, there was also a video created about process analysis and how-to writing, and then that could be demonstrated, that knowledge of, process writing and step-by-step sequencing, that could be demonstrated in lots of different ways. This is just one cool example. There were lots, but here's a cool example from a sophomore. All right, thank you. So obviously, I think that's a pretty cool springtime video. It speaks for itself. So great job by Kate Ferreira. Next slide, please. Some highlights of professional development. Some of the things that my department's been working on, especially at the high school level, but collaborating and talking with middle school teachers as well. We've expanded some test training and piloting for MAP testing this year for grades 9 through 12, and that's something that's continuing to go on. We've also created a course, Mike Festukas and myself helped talk about humanities course, combining history, social studies, and art, as well as other content areas to begin development for a co-taught humanities course that we're excited to keep working on, and that's something that we're hoping to have in the program of studies in the near future. Also, of course, with the hybrid learning, document camera mastery, right? Our teachers just sort of hit the ground running. So there's some very specific technology, professional development. And so that was one thing that we gained some expertise in. And then, of course, there was another faculty-led PD called Creating Inclusive Classroom Libraries, which Ms. McCook and Ms. Berry worked on. Next slide, please. So here's a brief video. I think we'll get the main idea if we watch about a minute or so, but it's just a fun demonstration of understanding of a Shakespearean play. Obviously, there are lots of different modes that we can learn in. There's also lots of different ways to demonstrate that learning. And this is just one example of some of the great things that Miss Backman's class did. So play the video, please.
But soft, methinks I scent the morning air. Brief, let me be. Sleeping within my orchard, my custom always of the afternoon. Upon my secure hour thy uncle stole, with juice of cursed Hebna in a vial, and in the porches of my ear did pour the leprous distillment, whose effect told such an enmity with the blood of man, that swift as quicksilver it courses through the natural gates and alleys of the body, with a sudden vigor doth posset and curd, like eager droppings into milk, the thin and wholesome blood.
So did it mine, and a most instant teta barked about, most lazar-like, with vile and loathsome crust, all my smooth body. Thus was I, sleeping by a brother's hand, of life, of crown, of queen, at once dispatched, cut off, even in the blossoms of my sin. Unhouselled, disappointed, unannelled, no reckoning made but sent to my account, with all my imperfections on my head. Oh horrible, most horrible! If thou hast nature in thee, bear it not. Let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest. But howsoever thou pursues this act, take not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge, to prick and sting her. Fare thee well at once. The glowworm shows the maidens to be near, and gins to pale as ineffectual fire. Adieu, adieu, adieu. Remember me.
Scooch, I knew that was Hamlet. I knew that.
You've heard of that one before?
I've heard of that one before. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was strong. That was strong. Next slide, please.
It's soft.
All right, and I'll end with a poem that students from Ms. Berry's class composed together. That the task was to write "Get More Bland," next sun's ray. Every day the same as before, a book of identical pages, sitting behind a closed door, a quiet room as the storm rages. But by the end the sun will shine, the tightly shut door will open wide, leaving this desolate life behind, wiping away the tear I once cried. The sun smiled down on this somber day, and by nighttime, all will be okay. So if ever we needed a message of hope and upliftingness, thought this was a great one. So there's students, Sydney Barbers, Amelia Fornicola, Maggie Berlinger, and Samra Eshal composed that together. So great job by them. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Dave. Anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Pescucci? Brad?
Yeah, I just, once again, thank you for the presentation. It's so great to see the student work and to see all the creativity the teachers are doing. I love that you're using literature to engage with the critical issues of the day. I think our humanities classes especially are the places where we can encourage our students to think about and to engage with these topics, and where we can model for them like how to do it respectfully and responsibly. I think that's one of the most important things we can do for our students and future citizens. So I want to just say thanks for doing that. I think it's really important, and I'm very excited about the humanities class and bringing all this together. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Brad. Anybody else? All right, thanks, Scooch. Appreciate it. We're moving on to now, Beth.
All right, our third one of the evening and the final curriculum presentation to wrap up will be our elementary curriculum update. So thank you to Valerie and Dave who presented already this evening, and I'm happy to begin the elementary curriculum update for everyone this evening. So this presentation was actually created by our Elementary Curriculum Council, which is a group of 9 to 10 educators who came together to collaborate on these slides. And 2 of those educators are with us this evening who are going to share in this presentation with me. As I previously mentioned, Kelly Hart, who is one of our kindergarten teachers at Shaker Lane, and Rita McKinley, who is a reading specialist at Russell Street School. So as other curriculum coordinators have stated tonight and in our previous evenings with presentations, it's been a unique year where we have had to adapt, be creative, be flexible, and be patient. And so we're happy to share with you this evening some updates from our elementary curriculum and how it was implemented this year and adapted to the uniqueness of this school year. So one adjustment that I'll share right off the bat is that usually in many of our elementary grades, especially as we get closer to the 5th grade, our students actually start to switch teachers for at least one content area a day. However, this year, due to the health and safety protocols of COVID, this wasn't an option. So this means that our elementary teachers taught every single content area to their students every day. And so that it may seem simple, but it's one of the things that we had to adjust for this year, and making sure that we had enough supplies and materials for all teachers to teach all of the content areas. So we'll dive right in to social studies first. So social studies at Shaker Lane. As we heard 2 weeks ago from Mike Festukas, our history grade 6-12 curriculum coordinator, we know that the Massachusetts State Framework was updated in 2018 for history. And so our teachers worked through the frameworks and have updated their materials and curriculum. And so at Shaker Lane, we use a lot of trade books in order to deliver the lessons, as well as the Explorer magazine, which you can see in the middle there pictured. And then also Teachers Curriculum Institute, which we known as TCI, is the curriculum that's used starting in grade 2 for our history, or social studies. And so in social studies, there's a lot of collaboration and discussion with classmates and talking about how to become a citizen. What does it mean to be? Fun and interesting here is that the top right and the bottom left picture, the students are creating a key for a heart map. So it's a map of their own heart, and they had to make a key for what's in their heart. And so if you look closely, you can see, my family is in their heart, which is just a really sweet conversation that is had. And then the other two pictures, the top left and the bottom right, the students, again, were working on making a key for a map. And so they had to create a map of the United States and label on their key and then on the map, Massachusetts, Boston, and specifically Littleton. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Steve. I will kick it over to Rita, who is going to share grades 3 to 5 social studies with us.
Okay, thank you, Beth. The social studies curriculum at Russell Street is aligned with the 2018 Massachusetts State Standards. The primary curriculum resource for grade 3 is the Gibbs Smith text, Massachusetts Our Story, and for grade 4 and 5, the Teachers Curriculum Institute, TCI. While each grade covers its own units or topics, as you can see listed, all 3 grade levels use a project-oriented approach in social studies, where students often collaborate to research and create products such as posters, models, simulations, and a variety of writings. As part of the study of the Revolutionary War, 5th grade has a battlefield day each year in which students research a famous battle of the Revolutionary War, then collaborate in groups to recreate a battle on cardboard or poster paper using a variety of materials. This year, the event was held virtually with models shared on Google Slides. The famous face poster down at the bottom right is also from the 5th grade study of the Revolution. In this project, each student researches a famous Revolutionary War figure, then creates a famous face poster for a presentation to the class that includes a timeline of the person's life and how they figured prominently in the Revolution. The bottom left picture shows the desk work of a 4th grade student engaged in a mystery Skype. This is part of the 4th grade map skills study. Students from Russell Street connect via Skype with a mystery class elsewhere in the country, then ask questions and use those clues and their map skills to eliminate regions and states until they can determine where the mystery class is located. Next slide.
That is me. Just before I start, Chairman Fontanelle, I want to thank you for your service. And I know we've spent some time together over the last 2 years. And I appreciate your kindness and your advocating for both students and staff. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that.
So K-5 math, we primarily use everyday math as our main piece of curriculum. We did find some challenges with that this year because everyday math is wonderful in that it's very hands-on, it's collaborative, there are a lot of games, which some of those things were quite difficult to do due to COVID safety reasons this year. So we have been adjusting lessons, and we're thankful that the district has provided us with additional manipulatives and materials so that all students, both who are in the hybrid and at home, were able to have their own materials. and that was really helpful. We used Dreambox Learning a lot this year because it is an online interactive program that is based on a student's ability level. It grows with them, and it's very games based, so it looks like a really fun computer game, and it provides students with little rewards actually when they complete certain lessons, and I know the kids in my class have really loved that. We look forward to doing more centers and having more sort of hands-on approach once we get back to a new normal, hopefully next year.
Thanks, Kelly. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, we'll transition to English Language Arts, ELA, at Shaker Lane. So at Shaker Lane, we've worked over the past couple of years to implement Foundations, a phonics program, and that is fully implemented in grades K to 2. It's really become a daily part of the school day for our students and our teachers. And so you can see actually in the bottom right picture, a student is working on a Foundations lesson and working on letter creation and formation. And so Foundations is taught as a whole class, and then often it's followed by continued practice with word work activities, and then guided reading groups. And so one of our ECC members said that the teachers really enjoy teaching Foundations, and they've been able to see a really great improvement in our students by use of implementing Foundations. And so they're looking forward to continuing with the Foundations program. Another, something else that was incorporated that's been really wonderful in the ELA in the K to 2 grades is novel engineering. And so you can see a picture of the novel engineering. The bottom right picture is the novel engineering. And so it's actually an integrated approach to teaching the principles of engineering and literacy. And so it really allows the students to dig deep into a text, into a book, and learn more about the character and the plot, and figuring out kind of having a problem and then having to create a solution for that character based on what is happening within the novel. And so it's been really nice, and Heidi McGregor has really helped and supported novel engineering by creating STEAM bags for the students at Shaker Lane, particularly this year, which was really wonderful, so that every student, as Kelly had said, that was one of the tough tasks, is making sure that all students had materials to work with and be hands-on with, so that we weren't sharing between students. As the ECC member said, that the students really love the novel engineering projects, and they love that at all levels. Whenever it is implemented, it goes a long way. The Journeys program is our anchor resource for ELA, and it allows for reading comprehension, grammar concepts, and it really allows the connection for not only ELA specific, but also social studies and social emotional learning. In the top right picture is a student who is reading and engaging with the Journeys text. And then the top left picture, we see a remote student who's engaged in her at-home remote learning space. And then lastly, the last thing I'd like to touch upon, and I know Rita will most likely touch upon this as well, is that we're excited that we're going to be having the pilot of our Lucy Calkins Units of Study Writing program in our elementary grades next year. And so staff at Shaker Lane are excited for the PD that is coming up in June, for them to really dig into that program, so we're ready to get it launched next year. If we can go to the next slide, please, Steve, and I will pass it over again to Rita.
Thank you again. At Russell Street, our reading curriculum, just as at Shaker Lane, is anchored by the Journeys reading program. Among the benefits of this program are a scope and sequence that align with our state standards, common assessments, and an online teacher and student portal. Across all 3 grades, reading instruction is primarily done in small groups, and students enjoy a variety of engaging texts that include novels, graphic novels, picture books, informational texts, and articles. Kami and Pear Deck are among the many technology tools that have been very helpful in adapting our curriculum to our hybrid and remote learning environments this year. Epic, ReadWorks, and Newsela were great resources, allowing students to self-select texts for their own reading or to research topics for projects. In the fourth grade, Mrs. Dale and Mrs. Metcalf students engaged in a reading project celebrating winter holidays around the world. Students read about the cultural holidays in online articles and texts from Epic, then used Google Slides and clip art to create a living room representing one of those holidays. This year, as Beth mentioned, we started down the path of our adoption of the Lucy Calkins writing program as a pilot. Some classrooms got to experience it a little bit earlier than others. In the writer's workshop model, students are encouraged to write frequently, building their stamina as writers, as they also build their skill base in narrative, opinion, and informational writing. As part of the Bringing History to Life unit, Mrs. Metcalf's fourth grade students wrote their own historical fiction narrative set during the Revolutionary War from the point of view of someone in the war. In other fourth grade classrooms, students are currently writing immigration stories for the same unit. Another recent writing project was an opinion piece on whether students thought their town should ban plastic straws. Students were provided articles from different points of view and with different reasons to ban or not to ban, and then wrote their opinion in the form of a letter to their local government. A popular enrichment to our third and fourth grade writing curriculum are the poetry workshops led by Andrew Green of Potato Hill Poetry. In the fourth grade, one poetry project spearheaded by Mr. Green was the creation of an animal puzzle poems featuring similes and metaphors. We're in the process of incorporating Wilson Foundations in grade 3 as our phonics program. We'll be doing the training for that later this year, building onto the phonics instruction from Shaker Lane. In our reading intervention program, Fountas and Pinnell's level literacy intervention has provided a rich source of leveled fiction and nonfiction texts designed to help students grow as readers. Next slide, and back to you, Beth.
Thanks, Rita. So while we're talking about ELA and reading, we would be totally remiss to not include our librarians who work so hard to really foster and encourage a love of reading. So we have at Shaker Lane, Chris Havenor, and at Russell Street, Starla Hazen. And as I said, they both just really encourage and foster that love of reading for our students. And they've put a lot of thought, especially this year, into expanding our collections at both schools to be more diverse and inclusive. And so in the pictures here on the right, you can see that is the bag of returned books. I snapped that picture one day when I was at Russell Street because I was impressed at how full the bag was. And it was pretty early in the morning. And Starla, I ran into her and she was like, "Oh, that's my third bag already today." And it was impressive, the amount that our students at Russell Street are reading. And the same goes for Shaker Lane. So on the left, you see a picture of Chris with the Shakey's book bus that she made. So for some of us, we might remember seeing when we were in elementary school or in school, we would see a bulky TV roll into a classroom on a cart, and all had that sense of excitement, right? Because you knew that you were watching a movie and it was going to be a good day. I can't express to you the excitement that those students had in that classroom when Chris rolled in with that book bus. They were more excited than any of us ever were to see the bulky TV on the cart. It was heartwarming. I couldn't even, I can't express how wonderful it was. The kids cheered. They were so happy to have Chris come. So they were going to have their library lesson. And then they knew they were going to be able to pick out new books to bring home. So it really just goes to show the love of reading that is being fostered at our elementary schools. Next slide, please, Steve. So we'll go from ELA into science. And so we'll start with Shaker Lane. As Valerie said during her grade 6 to 12 presentation, science is really hands-on and uses manipulatives. And so it was a tricky year for our science lessons, but that didn't stop any of our teachers or students from really diving into science this year. So our educators had to find new ways for our students to learn the standards. during these COVID safety measures. And so our science curriculum, our anchor curriculum called FOSS, is usually really interactive and hands-on. So we had to be creative with how we were going to teach that content this year. And so you can see under the resources that in addition to FOSS, we supplemented with other ways that we're also engaging and able to cover the content that our students needed. At Shaker Lane, what they found really helpful was Mystery Science and Mystery Doug, really engaging videos about science and the content and the standards that students needed to know, but it was able to be done in the hybrid and remote classrooms. And so another way that science was delivered this year at Shaker Lane was through virtual field trips. It really provided authentic learning experiences. And so as you may recall from a couple of weeks ago when Heidi McGregor, along with our two of our students, Sammy and Ambi, presented about the STEM happening this year, they mentioned that we had visiting scientists from Alnylam come. And so our grade 2 students were they benefited, from the visiting scientists, which was really wonderful. And during that discussion, they spoke about states of matter. Another virtual field trip that you can see on the right here, the 2 pictures that are on the right of your screen, this was a virtual field trip where the presenter was on the screen in the front of the room and our students became sound scientists. And I will say I walked in partway through this virtual field trip and the kids were having a ball. They were really enjoying the sounds that they were making. And so they had a cup, they had a rope hanging from the cup, and then they were instructed to take a slightly damp paper towel and pull down on the rope. And it started out as, quacking duck sounds, and then they figured it sounded like all sorts of other things. So it was just fun to kind of hear their laughter and their joy of learning that day as sound scientists. So it was a really wonderful experience for our students that day. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Steve. I will pass it over to Rita to talk about science at Russell Street.
Thank you. Russell Street's science curriculum is aligned with the 2016 Massachusetts Science and Technology / Engineering Curriculum Framework. FOSS is the primary resource for our science curriculum, with each grade level focusing on specific topics. All 3 grade levels emphasize query-based, hands-on, and collaborative learning in science experiments and engineering projects. In implementing the curriculum, despite the challenges of the year, all 3 grade levels maintain the integrity of the standards, while following the current protocols. Students engaged in active learning experiences that utilize technology and integrated reading and literacy strategies too. The 3rd grade Structures of Life unit has students observing crayfish for structural and behavioral adaptations, a little crayfish in the upper left-hand corner of the slide there. In an example of a spontaneous bridge to ELA, when one of Mrs. Smith's class crayfish escaped its tank over a weekend, somehow managing to crawl its way down the 3rd grade hallway and into our school office area, Mrs. Smith immediately seized on the opportunity for a writing prompt on the adventures of the wayward crayfish. In the 3rd grade Water and Climate unit, students gathered earth materials from outdoors and then observed what happens to a drop of water when placed on it. You can see the lower right-hand corner, that's what the student is doing there. Looking to see, does it absorb, does it bead up? Typically, this is a group activity, but it was adapted to be an independent observation for this year. In science enrichment, 3rd grade students were treated to visiting scientists from Alnylam, thanks to a parent who organized the visits. Students were able to ask questions and hear about the scientists' work. And judging by the students' excited messages to the virtual visitors, many future scientists were inspired that day. 4th grade also enjoyed STEM enrichment experiences this year. An engineer from iRobot joined the grade level to speak about computer science. And a former Littleton student, now in college, virtually presented to students about her passion of digital animation and movie making. Over to the next slide and to you, Kelly.
Thank you. So we're going to go on to social emotional learning, which is such an important area for our youngest students as they learn to negotiate their way through our school day. We've had a lot of resources, and I think that this has been a really important area for us over the last year or two. At Shaker Lane School, our primary area is the HEART program, which stands for Honesty, Effort, Acceptance, Respect, and Taking Responsibility. It's the foundation of our social emotional learning at Shaker Lane. We use weekly second step lessons and responsive classroom. We've had a great social thinking curriculum spearheaded by Justine Matherin, who provided online lessons for both in-person and remote students at the beginning of the year when we're all trying to navigate something new. And we have had an emphasis on yoga, including professional development, which the kids have really loved, and so have the staff. So that's been wonderful. No two students are the same, so it's important that we have a plethora of different kinds of lessons. And then next slide, please. And then we go on to Russell Street School, and as the kids mature, instead of HEART, they have the STRIPE program. And the STRIPE program stands for Safety, Take Responsibility, Respect, Integrity, Perseverance, and Empathy. There are also second step lessons there. I know many teachers use responsive classroom, and there are a lot of activities that the students do together to form a community. So it's been a great year for social emotional learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. So I just want to say on our last slide there, Steve, thank you. Thanks to Rita and Kelly for volunteering to present this evening. They certainly did not have to, but they stepped up to the plate and wanted to share this information with all of you. So a big thank you to them for doing that this evening, as well as for all of our other curriculum coordinators who presented over the past few meetings about the updates with regard to curriculum during this very unique and challenging year. There were a lot of many hours put into this year to make sure that our students still had authentic, original learning experiences that allowed them to progress forward in their learning. And so thank you for allowing us to present this evening and the previous evenings and share this information with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth. Does anybody have any comments on the Shaker Lane and Russell Street curriculum materials that were presented to us tonight, Brad?
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for organizing not only these presentations, but all of them. They've been really, really helpful. And Kelly, I was glad to hear you say you concluded with, it's been a great year for social emotional learning. It was my fear that it hasn't been. And so hearing you say, because this year's been so tough, I'm so glad to hear. I'm not challenging, I'm just saying I'm glad to hear that you think it has been, and that we've been able to respond to our students' needs. That's really encouraging to hear. I have one specific kind of history question, just because that's who I am. This is, I guess, to Rita and Beth. I'm glad we're implementing the 2018 curriculum, but that 5th grade class is a monster. From revolution to Civil War to civil rights movement to other rights movements to everything else. Are we trying to cover all of that? That's an incredibly dense and big class with so many complicated subjects for 5th graders. It's great to start the conversation. I've never understood how that class can be taught.
So you're right. It's a ton of heavy material. The nice thing is that what's covered in 5th grade, you said it, right? It starts the conversation, and then it is constantly brought back in as students progress into older grades. And so it's important that our students are learning, not just covering the material, but really learning the important lessons that are there. But it is it's a hefty lift for all of that information. And so it's a continuous learning.
That's precisely the approach I was hoping we were taking. We've talked to the ELA people and the social studies people about empathy and understanding and making connections that happens at the high school level, but that only can begin if they've started this conversation, not superficially, but in depth early on. And I'm glad we're trying to do that. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you, Beth. Those are among the most important presentations we get every year. sometimes in the school committee, we're busy with the budget and things like that, and we don't always get a chance to reflect on what does that all mean, right? How does it get translated into what's going on a day-to-day basis with our staff and most importantly with our students? And it's always impressive. I've said this before. I don't know what kind of student I would be in this day and age. It's a different animal, but it's you guys do a really good job of conveying that even though we're aligning with frameworks and really trying to get through the mechanics of it, it's never lost that what it's really about is engendering enthusiasm and excitement, and you guys clearly balance that year over year, and our kids are very fortunate to be able to go to school in Littleton. So thank you everybody for those presentations. All right,
Mike, if I could say a couple of things.
Yeah, sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
It was very evident to me. First of all, thanks to the curriculum coordinators for their momentum during this year, and there are some common themes. I mean, we all realized that we needed to retool as we adjusted to remote and hybrid learning. But I've seen it every day this year. We didn't lose the momentum. We rolled up our sleeves and we figured out the different strategies that we needed to reach our students. Another common theme is we didn't stop. We still continued on with the initiatives that we had in the various curricula and had continued to have high-level discussions and also continued to focus on social and emotional learning and not as a separate entity, but something that is interwoven into everything that everybody does every day. I'm very proud of the work of our staff and our educators, and I'm very proud of our curriculum coordinators. They work tirelessly to bring their departments together to make sure that we have horizontal and vertical alignment. And they're always looking for new ways and better ways to reach our students and make learning exciting. So thank you so much. I think you're muted.
Yep, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Clencher. Thank you, everyone who presented. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. All right, we're going to do the public health metrics next. Katrina is at a library trustee meeting, so I have the material. Sorry about that. Steve Mark is going to share it on the screen. If we can go, Steve, right to the third slide. Yep, let's go next one. All right. So according to Katrina, the 7-day average of COVID cases continues to decline. And overall, we have encouraging signs. The 7-day average is now similar to the mid-October 2020 level, which was decent at the time. Test positivity is stable and low at 1.5%, and hospitalizations have been on the decline for the last 2 weeks and are similar early levels in early November. Deaths are at their lowest level to date, and vaccinations are high in Massachusetts. So overall, good trends. Let's go to the next slide. Case rates continue to be highest among people aged 15 to 19, followed by people aged 10 to 14, and then 20 to 29. All groups have seen a decline in rates over the past month as more people have been vaccinated. This week, the rate of decline slowed among 5 to 9 and 10 to 14-year-olds who are school-age children that are not eligible for vaccination yet, although it seems like in the media that's we're starting to hear about the possibility of that changing. And something to keep our eye on in the coming weeks, and a good reminder that until we do get that vaccination down to that level, those age groups, that we need to continue to use the layers of mitigation to prevent spread in those unvaccinated groups. Next, we're going to go to the Littleton data. We'll skip to the next slide. Littleton had 30 cases between April 18th and May 1st. That means we are still in the red. 2 weeks ago, we had 18 cases. So this week, we are higher compared to 2 weeks ago. And when you look back, we have been in the red with 28 and 32 cases over 4 of the past 5 weeks. If we look at the next slide, the average daily incidence rate per 100,000 for the last 14 days, which is through this data is through May 1st, and for all the areas we've been tracking, the different geographic areas, Littleton's rate at 22 per 100K is essentially our rate has been level for the past 5 weeks. So we're not getting worse, but we're definitely not getting better. But on the other hand, the state, county, and surrounding areas have all trended lower over the past 5 weeks. So we're kind of stuck in a holding pattern. We can go to the next slide. The total test positivity graph through May 1st, and the number of tests conducted for our town were stable. Our test positivity last week was 2.32%, higher than our test positivity 2 weeks ago. And again, you can see that the test positivity for other areas that we track are trending lower while we continue to kind of creep up or hold. Right, so this is the vaccination coverage. This is a weekly vaccination report through May 6th. Today, Littleton has done a great job with vaccinations. About 65% of our residents have received at least one dose, and 43.6% are fully vaccinated. Of the 0 to 19 group, 335 individuals have received at least one dose, so we're starting to see that pick up some momentum in those lower ages as vaccines become more available to more age groups. If we go to the next slide, Littleton schools are in the schools. The mitigation measures we're taking are doing a great job with those, and it's having an impact. We've been stable in terms of the health notification levels over the last 2 weeks. There's been one case reported so far this week at Shaker Lane. And if we go to the next slide, Katrina just wanted us to keep in mind that given the limited science available a year ago, which continues to evolve, it is amazing to reflect on what we have all achieved through this together in the past year and keep using those layers of mitigation, masks, outdoors, vaccinations to help prevent the spread so that we can have a successful end to the school year and set ourselves up for a great summer. And I know we were talking about some of the curriculum presenters were talking about hopefully September will be normal or as close to normal as we can get. And a lot of that is going to depend on vaccination rates and all the work that we need to do throughout the summer to stay safe. So keep working on that stuff. We appreciate all the effort Katrina has put forward on this stuff. It's been very helpful this year. And at this point, I think Lynn Snow has some comments about the pool testing program.
Oh, Mike, can I just note for the record?
Sorry,
Just for the record, those are horrible circles.
Yeah.
You're leaving. We appreciate you and everything, but you can't draw a circle.
It looks like it's kind of like a science thing. It's like an amoeba, right? I don't know that I was trying for a circle, Brad, because it was like, it was just those trying to connect those dots, not always a circle.
Look, we appreciate your 15 years, but come on, man.
Yeah, drawing was never my strong point. So, all right, Lynn, what's going on with the pool testing program?
Pool testing continues to go well. We still have no positive pools. We did last week have the pool that was impacted due to a lab accident. We found out, so there was a delayed positive pool and the families were contacted and given the opportunity to retest. And this week we did not have any positive pools, but we did have a positive case that participated in pool testing. So I just wanted to take a minute to clarify and make sure everybody understands. We've talked about this initially, but I think it definitely bears repeating that when we're thinking about like the specimen integrity within the pool testing, it can be affected by the quality of the specimen collection, and it can result in some of the specimens having limited amounts of viral genetic material for detection. So inadequate individual specimens, including those with just limited amounts of viral genetic material, might not be eliminated from the pooled specimen before testing. So somebody can participate in pool testing one day, and there could be no viral load or too low of a viral load indicated, and then test positive for COVID the following day if symptoms start to manifest, later or after the fact. So. And even if in every individual specimen in a pool is adequate, the specimens in a pooled procedure get diluted. So then you get a low concentration of the viral genetic material, which might be below the limit of detection of a given test. So these limitations mean that the labs have to do a really good job, like validating the assay. They really need to be checking their instrumentation. So we will be giving this feedback of this pool that we experienced so that, CIC can do the job on their end. But this is something that's not unexpected and shouldn't really cause any unrest.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Any questions or comments on those based on that?
Oh, yeah, and I do have one more thing too. So, as we move forward, we will be looking into what the decisions or plans are going forward into the summer and into the fall. The Shaw Foundation has already reached out. They're looking for feedback from districts. So anybody wanting to kind of share feedback will be sharing that. And so what that tells me is that DESE's probably, working on their plans, and I'm sure information and guidance and plans will be forthcoming as well, as far as what's going to hold for the future with regard to pool testing.
Justin, I saw you. I want to ask one question first. Lynn, are we going to be able to get from DESE or anybody else, maybe at the end of the school year, sort of an analysis? Like, it's interesting to me that we have had no positive pools yet. And I just wouldn't necessarily have predicted that. And I would be curious to see how our results match up against other districts. Yeah. Yep. Because I think that would go a long way towards us determining, is this really a good idea to keep going? And I'm not saying getting all negative tests makes it a bad idea by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just curious to see.
Really, yeah. So like in last week's weekly pool testing, I have a couple times included the aggregate from CIC that gives us the percentage of positive pools with regard to the 800 some odd schools that are participating through that vendor. But there's also multiple vendors. I think 3 or 4 or 5 at this point vendors that have state contracts. So being able to, so that's the work I'm assuming DESE's doing right now. They're probably pulling all of that together to really determine the value and if it's worth it for them to continue to support this financially across the Commonwealth, but then also at the district level, districts deciding if they want to continue to have the bandwidth to be able to continue to do, looking at the local data. So I think all of those things are kind of in the mix now, but I definitely check out the data that CIC has just to see. I think ours is a little bit lower, like we're having had no positive pools, but just in general, most of the pools that they're testing are negative.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Justin?
Yeah, just had a quick question. So when I saw the picture of the book return in the bag there, kind of a 2-part question. Are we in fact still quarantining classroom and library books? And if we are, I suppose my question is, like, I was going to ask Katrina, what is the scientific / medical community think about that? I necessarily don't have an opinion on it either way, but my thought process here is, we just mentioned it, we're all trying to get back to normal. And if that's something that we can do to return to normal, I just don't want to see us doing unnecessary things or unnecessary burden. We're all just
it's a great question that you. Yeah, it's a great question, because I actually was just chatting with Steve about that today. He brought up, it'd be interesting because remember a year ago, we were wiping down all of our groceries, our Amazon packages, everything. And so there was a lot of research that was done to look at surfaces. And so what's nice now is that we've done a tremendous amount of disinfecting of high touch surfaces, but there should also now be a lot more research coming out about that. So I'm hopeful that, throughout and into the summer, there's going to be more data and research and guidance from DESE as far as what they're going to provide as guidance with regard to deep cleaning, disinfecting, cleaning, wiping down high touch surfaces. I think we need it. I think there's a lot of benefit to wiping down high touch surfaces. We have lower rates of colds and flus than probably we ever have, which is great. So there's some benefit, but it's just looking at how much and do we need to quarantine books? So I think we will need to look at that and to see what is essential. And what do we really have to do, and what are we doing that we can kind of pare back a little bit on to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Perfect. I appreciate that response. And again, I don't have necessarily an opinion either way. It was just, we don't want to be quarantining books 2 years from now if we don't have to be. So
right. If we can't catch COVID for books, yes, we shouldn't be quarantining them. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Great. Thank you, Lynn. All right, next on the agenda is bus registration. Steve Mark.
Good evening. Before I start, Mike, I'd just like to echo everyone's comments and thank you for years of service. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for all of your dedication.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
As far as, let me share my screen here. Okay. So bus registration. So it's that time of year again where we have to start thinking about bus registration for next school year. And I will emphasize the fact that we are still following COVID cleaning protocols within the buses. So the buses are getting wiped down in between bus runs and cohorts, and they get deep cleaned at night and sprayed and disinfected and things like that. So we are still following those protocols. Registration next year, we are changing the process a little bit. So we have developed an online registration process. The biggest difference that the public needs to understand, and we will get this message out through the principal newsletters, we will do a robocall, we will put this link on our website. We are asking that every parent, every student that needs to ride the bus, wants to ride the bus, register to ride the bus. Normally what we've done in the past is we've had registration. You only needed to register if you needed to pay the Littleton bus fee. That is changing. We are asking every parent who needs to register to ride the bus to go online to the platform, and I'll walk through it in a minute, and register whether you need to pay the fee or not. We've worked with a local developer. We have a system that when you put the address in the school, and I'll show you, it actually will go out and determine whether you need to pay the fee or not, and do that process. So give me a second. I just like to walk through this process, and I'll walk through it. So this will be the link that comes up, and we will have this link on our website, and this link will be open, and registration will start and will open on May 17th. That's a week from this coming Monday. There's still a few more things we have to finalize in this, but for this presentation, it's excellent. So when people click on the link, this will come up. They'll put in some names, put in student names. Put in a date of birth. Put in their school. I'm going to pick high school on this one. Grade 10. Select the address. Now the addresses are preloaded. We downloaded the information from the town GIS system. So as soon as you start to type in a street, an address and a street, it'll populate. So I'm going to put I'm just going to put 19 Adams Street, Littleton, Mass. The name, phone number, and then from here, if you want to add a sibling, you can, and you can add up to, I believe it's 6 siblings.
Oh, the DeCoste family just gets under the wire. You put in the school. I'm going to pick Shaker Lane. I'm going to pick grade 1. You can add more siblings if you want to, but the process is the same. Once you've added all the siblings, you hit continue. Oops, doesn't have a valid email address. Sorry. So now you can continue. What did I leave out? No, nothing. Sorry, stage fright, I guess. Okay, what's going on?
Technology is always great until it doesn't work.
Oh, this is embarrassing because it worked this afternoon.
Of course it did.
Well, that's embarrassing. It worked this afternoon, so I apologize for this. But what will it do? What it does is it go ahead. Seriously, it worked this afternoon. It will go out for the student that's free. It will say, thank you. Here's a list of students that you're registering that are free, that don't cost anything. You click continue, and then it will take you to the payment section for that student or those students that do need to pay the fee. It bounces you over to it links you over to our Unibank online payment center. You can put in your credit card information or electronic check information. And again, I remind everybody, if you use an electronic check, it's called an ACH, there is no fee. If you use a credit card, MasterCard, Visa, not Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover card, there is a convenience fee that's charged by the bank. We've had that for multiple years going on. So that's nothing new. Hold on.
That's all right, Steve. We got it. We appreciate it. I think we're good.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on. So, okay, so it's a very easy process. It identifies those students that are free, those students that need to pay, dumps you over into that payment system to pay those transportation fees. It does cap out at the $675. That's the family max. After you enter in your payment information, it does give you a receipt. So you have that, and it'll give you the Unibank transaction number if there's ever an issue on our end, and there's a question, you can call this contact central office, and we have those reference numbers. Again, I apologize, this isn't working, but it will be that simple. You just put the information in, and it links everybody out. Again, the biggest change is every student, whether you have to pay the fee or don't pay the fee, we're asking every parent to register those students that need to ride the bus. So that's the biggest thing. Again, this link will be up and available on May 17th, and registration will start, and it will close on June 30th. And that's all I had. Thank you again. I apologize.
Okay.
It isn't working, but it worked this afternoon. So
That's fine. All right. Any questions or comments, Justin?
Yes, Steve, that I'm sure that was probably just Mike playing a joke on you at his last meeting. So I'm sure you'll get that bug worked out. And the system does look pretty slick. Is this the same thing that's going to help us? You had mentioned to me earlier that you were working on something like a beta version of bus routes and efficiencies. Is this going to dump into that system and then try to help us there?
We don't do an online bus routing system. Those routes are done manually by the bus company. But what it does is it gives us a better picture of who's actually riding the bus. What we used to do was we would automatically assign seats for those students that were eligible to ride the bus. So eligible to ride the bus for free is grades K through 6, more than 2 miles from the residence to the school that they were attending. We automatically registered and saved seats on a bus for those students. And many times, a lot of those students, in fact, didn't ride the bus. They were driven by their parents, carpooled with other neighborhood residents and things like that. And so we didn't have a real good picture of how many students were actually riding the bus. This will give us that better picture.
And do we estimate that we're going to have, is the assumption we're going to have normal busing participation next year? Because obviously this year's way off.
That's what our anticipation is. It's hard to tell whether parents are still going to be comfortable putting students on the buses next year. We assume that once the schools get back, in the fall, that we're anticipating that ridership is going to be back to its normal levels.
So that
time will tell, but
yeah, that brings up a good question, Justin. So, Steve, you said that the registration period was going to be the 17th through June 30th.
Yep.
Will there be an opportunity Because people by June 30th, we might not yet have we might have a better picture than we did last June 30th of what September is going to look like, but there still might be a fair degree of uncertainty, maybe not as much, but still some. Will there be an opportunity in July to reopen it?
Yes, if we need to reopen it because the information we're getting from the state or we're getting a lot of inquiries from parents, we can certainly reopen that portal and have that open in July.
Right. Maybe something to think about.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And there will be an email link on there. If people have questions, they can email that email link and we'll respond to email. So, yep.
All right. Very good. Anybody else?
Thank you. And again, I apologize it didn't work, but I promise
That's
it.
all right.
So
Totally Mike's fault. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. It's going to be Mike's fault for a while, I guess, after this, no matter what
it'll
happens.
probably work after while you guys are talking, I'm going to go try it. It'll probably work.
All right.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right. No problem. All right. So next we're going to talk about COVID stipends to staff. Kelly talked about how he and I have had more talks and sit downs in this 1 year than probably the last 5 to 8 years combined. But one of the things that, as we were talking more recently, was we thought about, we've talked a lot about, and Stevie, can you bring that presentation up for me? What the challenges have been for our staff, and we've tried to be cognizant of that and recognizing it, but we felt like we wanted to think about something else. So I want to bring this forward to the school committee tonight. We can all agree that the 2020-2021 school years have been one of unprecedented challenges and requirements for everyone, but not least of all for our public school employees. The Littleton School Committee Administration recognized that our staff have had to meet their regular job responsibilities each school day, all while being asked to also support the significant requirements of COVID-19 mitigation strategies and procedures that have definitely helped us maximize our in-person instruction while also helping keep our students and staff safe and healthy. And we've also had to have our staff supporting our remote learners. Many staff worked extra hours in the summer to come up with plans for hybrid and remote teaching, while others worked tirelessly to prepare the buildings and classrooms to meet social distancing requirements and have the required supplies and materials for hand sanitizing, PPE, cleaning, and disinfecting. The next slide, staff participated in professional development to ramp up on COVID-19 health protocol and safety protocols regarding social distancing and use of PPE, cleaning and disinfecting, screening for COVID symptoms, and other procedures. They participated in additional professional development specific to delivering curriculum to in-person and remote learners, which required the use of cameras and other technology. Once the classes started, all our staff were required to meet their normal job requirements and responsibilities, but also adhere to requirements regarding safety and health protocols and support our students and help them navigate those same safety and health protocols. Basically, every staff member was asked to do their regular job and then do their COVID job on top of that. And our students benefited greatly from those efforts. We had, Littleton had in-person instruction on the first day of school in all our buildings, while many other districts opened fully remote. Our staff's efforts on the health and safety protocols allowed us to avoid in-school COVID outbreaks and let us maximize the number of in-person learning days. Our remote instruction program was far more robust than most districts, with an emphasis on in-class synchronous instruction and learning versus independent asynchronous work by remote students. And then when DESE mandated a full return to in-person instruction, the efforts by our staff allowed us to reopen well before the mandated deadlines. We really didn't give staff a lot more hours or more days to get all of this done. We just asked them to fit more work and effort into the same hours each day, which they did day after day, week after week. And the school committee administration, we've strived to regularly communicate our appreciation and admiration for all this work and effort, but now the chair and the superintendent feel it's time to put some money where our mouth is. So we are proposing or asking the school committee to authorize a one-time $1,000 stipend to be paid to all non-LEA staff for the additional work and responsibilities they were asked to provide during the school year. This would cover custodians, cafeteria workers, teaching assistants, administrative support staff, administrators, OTs, PTs, BCBAs, technology staff, and a few other job descriptions. And please note that the LEA members, teachers, and nurses are not part of this proposal, but only because we are in active salary negotiations with the LEA right now. Both sides have proposals on the table and we're working through them. After an agreement is reached, additional compensation along these lines is definitely something the school committee can certainly consider. But for the moment, we're focusing on non-LEA members. The number of staff that this would cover is approximately 111. And for reference, we have approximately 144 LEA members for a total staff count of approximately 255. I use the word approximately on all of these because it's a fluid situation. We have staff changes kind of almost weekly. So for those 111 non-LEA members, we're talking about a total cost for the stipend program of $111,000. This would be a one-time non-pensionable payment, which would either be included in a regular payroll check or on a separate payroll run. The administration, talking with them, has indicated they would need at least 2 to 4 weeks to prepare for these stipends to be paid. We are proposing that the cost of this stipend program be covered with school choice funds. At our budget, public budget hearing, we saw that we would have a projected balance of approximately $2 million. So we're confident that the school choice fund can support these stipends and still retain a healthy balance. In addition, we should keep in mind that there are additional federal COVID relief funds expected this summer to help meet ongoing budget challenges that we might otherwise have needed to use school choice funds for. So with that money coming in, the superintendent and I feel that we can meet this program with the school choice funds. It could certainly be argued that the amount of the stipend is not commensurate with the amount of extra work and effort our staff has provided this year, but we are hopeful that this will be regarded as a meaningful and sincere gesture of recognition for everything our staff has done for our students in our district in a year of historical and unprecedented challenges. Regardless of how bad things were, and they certainly were bad at times, they would have been much, much worse if not for the work and commitment of our staff. So that is what we are proposing. At this point, I would like to ask the school committee what they think. Is this something that we support as a committee? Brad, yep.
Absolutely. I wish we could do more. Just looking again at these curriculum presentations and just seeing how many adjustments these the teachers had to make. We'll talk about them separately, but it's not just the teachers, it's all the people who've been working to make this school system operate this year. We have the money. I think it's appropriate. I'm eager to do this to show our town's appreciation for the work these people did.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, I would concur with Brad. I think, as you said, it's not commensurate of the extra work they did, but just the gesture in itself, I think, is important to show that we know what you've been doing this year, and it is very much appreciated. Obviously, wish we could do more, but I think that the gesture should go a long way with everyone to realize that they are appreciated. We understand what you've gone through. That it was not always easy, but you did rise to the challenge, and we are very thankful for it.
All right, Justin.
Yes, certainly something I can support and get behind. I'm not aware of many other districts doing this, so I think it's awesome. Mike, I think, you think you're getting off the school committee, but I think you might find a couple of write-ins for your name, people trying to keep you around for this type of thing. And I just want to add that, it feels a little awkward during Teachers and Nurses Appreciation Week to not necessarily be including them in this conversation. And I'm eager to have the negotiations wrap up so that we can make them whole as well. So certainly something I'm willing to support, and thank you for the idea. And very proud of what everyone did this year.
Timlin?
This is definitely something that I'd support also. The guys already said everything, but I definitely appreciate all the work that all the staff and custodians and the cafeteria workers and the admins have put in this year. And I wish it could be more, but I think, like everyone said, this is something to show you that we understand what you've gone through this year, how much work you've put in, and we do appreciate it all.
All right. Kelly Clinchy, do you have anything you want to add before we possibly entertain a motion?
Just that I'm in full support of this, as you pointed out. I really think it is a nice gesture and recognition of how difficult this year was, and our staff went the extra mile to make sure that our schools were safe, our students were getting a robust educational program, and they never stopped to look in the rearview mirror. They just kept going forward. So, and we all know that every individual in our organization is key. They're all equally important, and it's all of us working together, including the school committee, that allows us to be successful. So, I'm very thankful that we are able to do this monetarily, and we are, because we've worked very hard as a school committee and administration to make sure that we had sufficient funding to weather the storm, so to speak.
All right. I'd just like to add that I support this. I brought it forward, so I'm going to support it. I will say that the least favorite part of this job for me has been balancing what we can do for our staff in terms of compensation and salaries with the limited resources we have, and trying to make sure that the school committee is working with the FinCom and the select board to make sure that we're getting the correct distribution of resources to all the things we need to be the town of Littleton, right? We need highway, we need public safety, and it's the least favorite part of my job was telling the union and the staff, we can't do more than we're offering. Like, this is the way it's got to be. It wasn't always pleasant. It was difficult. I really wish that public education was funded in a much, much different manner and at a much higher level than we as a society have chosen to do it. But the reality of the situation is we got to play the hand we're dealt. And so when we have a chance to do something like this, I'm all for it. I wish we could do something like this more often. I wish we could do more on a regular basis so that it's not these kind of one-off type gestures. But I think in this instance, it's worthwhile. So I'm glad that we seem like we have consensus on that. We will continue to work with the LEA, and I'm confident that we can come to an agreement with them, and then we'll see where we're at for the rest of the staff that are not included in this current stipend program that we're talking about right now. So at this point, if anybody has any other comments, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve a one-time $1,000 stipend to all non-LEA school employees.
Second.
All right,
Third.
very good. Thank you. Motion made second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none, I'll go for a roll call vote. Brad?
Brad Austin votes yes.
Matt?
Matt Hunt votes yes.
Timlin?
Timlin Rassius, yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
And Mike Fontella votes yes as well. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate that. And the administration, you guys have your direction, so just keep us updated on when you think you can get that done. All right. And next on the agenda, an update on the high school sewer discharge site. So we had a meeting with the Littleton Water Commissioners last night. Talked at length about the sewer discharge project. There were two aspects of the conversation that came out of that we need to talk about tonight and see if we want to make some decisions. The first part of it is, one of the things we were considering was how to replace the playing surface after the discharge site work was done. One thing that was considered was possibly replacing the natural playing surface with a synthetic playing surface. We asked the water department to think about, or try to, give us some information about what the cost differential was. Right now, this is a $2.5 million project, and it was originally designed with seeding and watering to replace the playing surface. The concern we had was that would require 2 growing seasons. And growing seasons are either fall or spring. Summer is not a growing season. It's just too hot. And then winter, obviously. And of that $2.5 million, $1.5 million is being covered by a state grant, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. The water department did do some research on the additional cost of a synthetic turf surface. They were basically came back and said that the total cost for a typical synthetic playing surface about the size that we were looking at would be close to $1 million. They felt that looking at the project the way it was originally designed, it was about $250,000 to $300,000 built in for the replacement of the grass surface. So the differential, it was close to $700,000, which would not be covered by the $2.5 million right now, which has been that $1.5 million from the state and $1 million from the town, authorization from a town meeting vote. My personal opinion is that we, as a school department, do not have that kind of money to cover it. That even if we did, that would probably not be the most appropriate way to spend that huge chunk of change. But at this point, I'm curious to see if there's anybody else who either agrees or would like to think about trying to explore that further. Matt?
Yeah, I would agree. Well, for first, that I think that it's just it's a little bit extravagant for what we're looking at. I don't think we could justify that with everything else that we have on the table and things that we may have to be spending money on. Put a synthetic field in right now. And that being said, I think a lot of more information is coming out right now about synthetic fields, so that we want to be a little bit. Before I would support a synthetic, I'd want to do a lot more research on it. I think we're finding out more now than we knew when we put in alumni. So I would definitely be in support of just going with the seeding and watering.
Right. Let me also offer one thing. One thing that did come out of the conversation in meetings prior is the water department did offer that the putting sod in instead of grass in seeding and watering would only be about a $70,000 differential, which they feel like they can fit inside that $2.5 million. And the benefit to that is that will only take one growing season to come back. So right now, the consensus in the meetings that I've been at was that if we're not going to do synthetic, that sod would probably be the right way to go. The cost differential can be absorbed by the current budget of the project, and avoiding 2 growing seasons of lost access to those fields would be significant. Brad?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I was, I attended the meeting last night, and I was glad to see you kind of push them about timetables and what's possible. What they were very clear about is that there's just no way this will come in at a number. Even if we wanted to do turf, and I'm not sure I do. In fact, I would probably vote against it if forced to right now. There's just no way it's going to come in a number that I would be close to wanting to support. If we can get the grant to pay for the side and get a nice side field, then I think that's a great scenario, especially because I remember Mike Lynn said when he was with us last time, and I think you said last night, is that one of the proposed benefits of alumni field is it would give the other fields, the grass fields in town, just much less use, and they'd be in much better shape. And I heard from Mike last time he was with us, and from you, that these grass fields are in really good shape. And if we put down a properly kind of installed sod field, I think the towns will really benefit, and our athletes will as well. I'll support the sod.
All right. Justin?
Sort of the same as what everybody said. I think we got 2 major hurdles to clear to try to get move towards artificial. I mean, I love the playability aspect of an artificial turf. It seems like we're kind of using the heck out of alumni, and to have another one would be great. But number one, we didn't have enough time to fundraise for this, and I certainly I'm not prepared to take it out of our budget. Number two, certain folks within the community have raised legitimate concerns about some environmental issues associated with artificial turf that we would need a bunch of time to do our due diligence on. So at this point in time, if our hands sort of being forced to make a decision, I think we got to go with the sod field. And I would just love to get some assurances out of the water department that they're going to be, putting that field back, of course, to the best of their abilities, and that we're going to have a really nice sod field that's going to be ready to go in that first season that we need it back. So that, the due diligence, not only on the sewer system, is obvious, but returning the playing surface for the kids is also equally as important.
All right. Tim, on your thoughts?
Yeah, after thinking about it and listening to people reading the emails that we received from the public, I think sod's the way we should go. I wouldn't feel comfortable going within our money to take out for a turf field. It would be nice for the kids to have it, but I don't think it would benefit us right now in doing that. So I'd have to back a sod field at this time too.
Right.
One of the questions I recall when we first had this presented to us 2 or 3 meetings ago, one of the advantages of the sod field was that we wouldn't have to water when to do these. I mean, of the turf field, we wouldn't have to do that. If we put in a sod field, what are the additional costs? Are we responsible for the watering? How does this work?
So good question. And after today, Ivan Bogasic, the chair of the water commissioners, reached out to me and let me know that they are definitely willing to support, as Justin just indicated, like they are really committed to, if we go with the sod, they will get it right. And what they said was, and we're going to segue into this discussion next, the timing of when the sod goes down is kind of important, because if it goes down in a spring and you have to wait for the following fall to get a good growing season, so you've got to keep it alive in the summer, you got to water the heck out of it. And it's not watering it to grow it, it's just to make sure it doesn't die. And then you get into the fall, you're still watering it, but now it's getting in those cooler days and nights, and it grows in, and then it should be ready for, if that was a sequence, but trying to survive that summer. So Ivan and I were talking about that. And what Ivan said was that they would much prefer to start this project, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as a second part of this conversation, this fall. And what he said was they will pay for all the water necessary till we get back on the playing surface. So until it's ready to play on, the water department will cover the use of water and the cost of the water to get that field back to where it needs to be. That led me to think about something else, which was the agreement with we have this MOA that's been in flux for far too long, but apparently that's not something I'm going to get done on my watch. So you guys, good luck to the rest of you. There is a memorandum of agreement between the Park and Rec Commission, the selectmen, the select board, and the school committee. One of the caveats of it is that the school department is not responsible for the cost of maintaining playing fields, even though they're on our property. That is the responsibility of Park and Rec, and because they're overseen by the select board, we get that, and what they get back is we don't charge them for access to our buildings for Park and Rec programming and things like that. The problem was at the high school that when we put that agreement in place, we only had one water meter up there. That water meter controlled the inside water use in the building and the outside, and we couldn't measure how much of the water usage was for the outside and how much was for flushing toilets and everything else that we do in the building. So we just paid the whole water bill on that meter. A few years ago, they put a second water meter in that is specifically for the outdoor water usage. But because we were already paying it and it's been built into our budget, we didn't really assert the agreement and say, look, somebody's got to pick that up, not us, because you guys are supposed to be paying for it. So I felt, and after talking with Ivan, and I appreciate the water department taking on the watering through the rebuild and the resurfacing of the playing field and getting us back whole. But I believe that it's important for the next school committee to get back with the select board and get that MOA and get that adhered to, so that we're talking about roughly $13,000 to $15,000 a year to water all the grass playing fields up at the high school. So we're not talking about, big bucks. But on the other hand, you're thinking about our athletic budget. If we had another $13,000 a year to, apply towards something like that, it would be meaningful. Right? We rely heavily on the alumni booster group, or the athletic booster group. It would be nice to be able to reclaim some money for other purposes. So I think this is an opportunity, because we're looking at this with a new set of eyes, that, we should probably think about taking the water department up on their offer to absorb the cost of watering it while it grows back in and we get back on it. But that should segue right into us approaching the town and select board and saying, hey, let's get this right. We're not supposed to be paying for this. There's a water meter over there. Just take the measurement. The bill's coming to you guys, and build it in the budget. So, but I agree personally also that I don't think synthetic's the way to go, based on the cost differential. I will say also that the real benefit to another synthetic turf field in Littleton won't be to interscholastic athletes. It will be to youth athletes. The big problem with only having the one is that it's our field, so we're always going to be first in line. And youth athletics is getting what's left over, and there's not as much left over as maybe we had hoped for when we envisioned bringing that facility online. We play night games there. Quite often, our youth athletes are not getting on that field till 7:30 at night. And in order to take advantage of it, that means they got to stay till 9:30, 10:30, which is not an ideal situation. But our interscholastic athletes, we're fine. Like, not having another synthetic turf field doesn't make any difference to us. Those fields at the high school are in great shape. Getting alumni online made a huge difference. It allowed us to reclaim those fields and get them in a pristine playing as a natural surface. Those are great grass fields right now. So my point being that if the town does think that we would benefit from another synthetic surface facility, it's going to benefit youth athletics. And I really think they need to be the drivers. They need to be the ones that are advocating for it. And, Justin talked about whether it's fundraising or asking the town to borrow money, that needs to come not necessarily from the school committee. We would certainly be a part of it, because in all likelihood, it would go somewhere on our property. It doesn't have to happen, but we are the biggest owner of open space that we already own that's for active recreation. But, I think that's a battle that needs to be, waded into down the road, and isn't necessarily something that we need to be at the forefront of. I think we can partner with people if they think that the community starts to think that that's a good idea. And I think Justin's right. I think it would be a good process. The right thing to do is to go through a process, and we don't have enough time to really go through a proper process. So I'm fine with saying, no, just going with the sod aspect of it and letting the water department know that we reached a consensus on that. We don't need to vote on that. That's the way the project is already being moved forward.
Mike, when do you anticipate losing the field? What was the start date?
That's the next discussion we have to have. It's a two-part discussion. So one of the things that we were discussing with them and we were advocating for was, our ostensibly preferred outcome from Mike Lynn's perspective after he talked to us and was that we would not lose the fall 2021 season, and the spring 2022 season is no big deal, because we don't really, interscholastically, we don't use that facility in the spring. It rests. We do have some youth use of that, but that's, it's minor traffic and it's not that big a deal. So it still gets the rest it needs. But from an interscholastic perspective, losing a spring season is no big deal. But we would, if we were advocating last night to ask the water department to think about starting that project, or what the feasibility was of starting that project in the March 2022 timeframe. They are very hesitant to do that because they need to spend that $1.5 million for the state grant needs to be spent by June 30th of 2022. And if it's not, whatever's not spent of that goes back to the state and we lose the benefit of it. We would have to, of that, say for the sake of argument that we hadn't spent $125,000 of that, we would then have to make that up, right? If it's still a $2.5 million project, we'd have to find as a community that $125,000. So they would much prefer to start this project this summer, and they would put the sod down in the fall, maybe October, November, and it would get some of the fall growing season. It would definitely get the spring of 2022 growing season, and should be online and ready to go for us in the fall of 2022. So that's their preferred outcome, right? That's their preferred direction, is that we give up the fall 2021 season and we're back on fall 2022. We were advocating, look, we would kind of prefer to keep the fall 2021 season available to our athletes and then give up the fall 2022 season. But now that one of the reasons we were advocating for that was to try to get more time to think about synthetic. Now that synthetic's off, it's not as compelling to wait. And it would definitely be advantageous to the town to make sure that we're going to get the full benefit of that $1.5 million grant from the state. I did have a brief discussion with Mike Lynn. He is resigned to the fact that he's going to have to live without those fields for a fall season. He gets that. And he said at that point, it doesn't truly matter. I mean, there is something to be said for we've disrupted our student athletes for a spring season, a fall season, a winter season, and a spring season. So it's going to be, but it's, we're going to be disrupting the boys and girls varsity and JV soccer teams. So they're still going to get to play. We'll put them down on Corper if we have to, or over to Whitcomb, or both, or Mike Lynn will schedule more night games on alumni for home games. So we can make it work. He's not worried about not getting it done. He thinks it'll work. It's a little bit unfortunate that we might be piggybacking on everything we've already gone through, but to take a break and then disrupt again, how much are we gaining or avoiding, by doing that? So we do need to give the water department at sometime in the not too distant future, I would say in the next week or two at the most, what we think we can do in terms of authorizing their access and what time frame we think we can support.
Okay. my only, I sort of agree with all of that. My only question would be, could we push them a little bit to try to, those fields are in great shape now. So could we get this fall season in, then have them start to work? Like last night, you said if we could just keep the field through October 30th, it seems to me like, based upon what you said, is they're going to spend this money in 3 or 4 months anyways. So if they start in October, granted the winter season presents some challenges with snowfall and things like that, but it would also make sense to have them finish the project, then lay down the turf in the next fall, because we wouldn't have to water it as much and risk losing it. And we're going to lose the fall season no matter what. I'd rather lose the fall 22 season versus the fall 21.
Justin, so that's a great question, because that question was asked last night. And the answer that was given was sort of a very quick, well, we don't really want to do that. But there wasn't any real discussion about, well, wait a minute, I know you don't want to do it, but like how viable is or isn't that? Because think about this. Is it feasible to delay the start of that project, into October? Because what we had been talking with them was, well, we want you to delay it, because we want to get the full season in and, delay it so you're definitely not going to break ground until March. But maybe if they broke ground in October or early November, they can get most of the work done, let it sit over the winter, and then finish it, get the sod in, early enough in the spring season to let it grow in during that growing season. And we might not lose a fall season. You could nobody's really talked about that. Is there a way to schedule this project so that we really don't even, or we, maybe we have to let our athletes on that field with a hard stop date of October 15th, which might only be 2 weeks left in the season. I think it might be worthwhile to ask Mike Lynn what he thinks about that and go back to the water department and push them a little bit to see, I know you don't want to do that, but can you make that work? How bad is an outcome is that for you, and see what they say.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile conversation, because what they're really looking for us to do is make a decision so they can go to bid. When they go to bid, they're going to get the project timeline, and then we might be able to shift that project timeline in between seasons, as long as they spend the 1.5 before June 30th and can get the work done. We might be in the ball game.
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Brad?
We don't want to jeopardize any of the 1.5. We want to make sure they have a chance to spend that. We don't want to jeopardize the integrity of the project. But if we can ask them, just look, be honest. How late can you start this? Maybe it's October 15th. Maybe it's October 7th. Maybe we can get 3 home games there. Maybe, I don't know how valuable the extra 5 or 6 weeks would be. But if it matters to our athletic director and our schools, then let's ask for it. But if it sounds like it's barring this kind of compromise solution that it's going to happen one way or the other this year, next year, then I'd say let's just get it done and get on the new fields as soon as possible.
I think it's reasonable, because I think Justin's right. I think I think the real thing they need to know is that we're not asking for any consideration for synthetic. That lets them go to bid. I don't think that we need to make a final decision tonight on when we authorize them to get on the property. There's time for us to continue to communicate with them and work with them to see if there's a compromise that can be achieved. If ultimately can't, they'll have time to, still get started in, June or July, which is what they think they would mostly prefer. But there may be some benefit to pushing them again and just asking, is there a compromise solution that we haven't put enough because we haven't put enough we might do the consideration and say, nope, it's just not right. It's not going to work. They can show it to us, and then we're going to say, well, all right, then do it when you have to, and we'll make it work. But I will say that that's going to make it somebody else's problem, not mine. So
I say we push them.
All right, so we can let them know that we've made a decision to go ahead with the bid documents on sod and continue the dialogue about timeframes, and let Mike Lynn know he should maybe weigh in and see what he might have something to say about. He might come back and go, look, guys, it's really not worth that aggravation. I'd rather just know I'm not going to be on there rather than play half the season up there and half the season. But he might not. He might go, no, you know what? Actually, that's a good idea. I can make that work, and we'll see. So I'll run that by him. I'll communicate on my last official day tomorrow, and then somebody else can pick it up. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Okay. Next on the agenda, under old business, is superintendent's contract update. So we did our evaluation of the superintendent a couple meetings ago. Typically what happens after that is we present that to and sit down with the superintendent and go over it. The superintendent then thinks about any addendums to his contract. Typically, minimally, we have a rolling 3-year contract with our superintendents. That's standard in Massachusetts. If the evaluation doesn't go the way either party likes, then typically you don't get that 3rd year tacked on there, and that sort of starts the countdown to a transition. But it was a good review, so we agreed that we would tack on another year to make it a rolling 3-year contract. Kelly asked for a 2% raise, which we discussed on our executive session. We agreed and voted on that we could support that. The only other thing that he asked for was a buyback provision for his unused sick time if he or when he decides to retire. That again is pretty standard to have in, that's in our LEA contract and is pretty standard in superintendent contracts. So we agreed to that and added that in there and took a vote on that. Kelly, is there anything else I'm missing, or is that the gist of it?
Well, that's it. Thank you.
All right. So we already voted that, so I think we're all set. We have to vote. Do we have to vote that in public session, Kelly, or are we good?
No, you do not.
Okay, so just an update on that. So that's all done. And all right. We are now at the end of our meeting, near the end of the meeting, so we're gonna have another opportunity. Yep.
Mike, my demo works. Do you guys care about seeing?
No, we appreciate it. We trust you, Steve. You had your shot, kid. You blew it.
I was just embarrassed it didn't work, but it does work, so.
All right. No worries. We know it's gonna work. All right, thank you though. This is the second opportunity for input from interested citizens. If anybody would like to speak before the school committee, please use the raise your hand function and Dorothy will get you in front of us.
We do not have any raised hands.
All right. Do we see quickly for the subcommittee reports, PMBC, anything there?
No, nothing.
No. Okay. How about budget subcommittee?
Nothing to report.
All right. Policy?
We're meeting next week. All right.
Okay. All right. How about CPAC, Brad?
I got some news for you, Mike. Had a very successful workshop on May 4th. Had about 15 families represented about basic rights. And now I have 3 different web things to introduce. We have a website for CPAC itself, which has a lot of information. It's a Littleton CPAC .weebly.com. And we have 2 different Facebook pages. One is a public page, which is a Littleton CPAC, which will have information about meetings and other things like that. The other is, because CPAC is a public group, we also have a parents page where parents of kids who have 504s or IEPs or are involved in this process can talk to each other without it being a public conversation. And that one's a Littleton Mass Special Education Parent Group. So anybody who's watching is interested in joining those, please do. And I'm sure we'll find ways, working with Lynn and with CPAC, to get these links out to people in a couple different ways. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Brad. All right. Anything else? All right. We will, Timlin.
I just want to wish all the seniors a good night tomorrow night. Prom tomorrow night.
Oh, excellent. Thank
I
you.
know they're all very excited.
All right. I would remind everyone that elections are Saturday. Our local elections are this Saturday. They are at the high school, not the middle school. The middle school gym is being used for storage due to the COVID things we had to do. So they're going to make it work at the high school. Appreciate everybody who's running for open seats. We're always a better community when we have contested races, even though it often means that good people are not going to win. We're definitely better off for it. So I appreciate everybody that's running. So make sure you get out and vote on Saturday. Anything else? We do require an executive session tonight for the purposes of contract negotiation, as well as we're going to vote on releasing some minutes from previous executive sessions. So if there was no other business at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn from open session into executive session with no intention to return to open session for the purposes of contract negotiation strategy discussion.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, so move to second. Somebody else is going to have to learn how to do that. All right, I'm just saying. Okay. All right, I'll take a roll call vote. Brad?
Brad Austin votes yes.
Timlin?
Timlin Rossius, yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
And Matt?
Matt Hunt votes yes.
And Mike Fontana votes yes as well. Thank you. Thank you, Judy and Dave from LCTV. Appreciate it. Bettina and Dorothy for facilitating the meeting. And I'm sure I'll see you all again next time. Maybe not next time, but the time after that. All right. Thank you, everyone.
You have to give your street next time, Mike.
Exactly. I have to remember that. Exactly.
And we are cutting you off, is all I'm saying.
Hilarious.
Do we have a link for executive session?